Welcome to Down There with Liz, the podcast series where we talk to people who do cool things down there. I'm your host, Liz from Lioness, and in this episode, I talked to Dr. Harin Padma-Nathan. He oversaw the FDA trials on sexual dysfunction drugs Viagra and Cialis, and now he's the co-founder and chief scientific officer of Vella Bioscience, where he developed a sexual enhancement serum for women and people with vulvas, as well as a family of additional products that can address menopause, menstruation, and more. In this episode, we talk about his time working on Viagra and Cialis and how he got to working on Vella. Before I jump into the episode, wanted to mention that if you're looking at this or if you're watching this on video, if it looks like I grew a couple sizes between the last episodes here and then jumping into that, it's because I recorded it over the summer when I was pregnant with my daughter. Figured some people might mention that potentially in the comment section, so I figured I would get ahead of it. And now, onto the episode. All right, so I'm here with Dr. Harin Padma-Nathan. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you, Liz.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me here. It's very nice. So there's quite a bit that we can talk about today because you focus a lot on, through your career, you've focused a lot on sexual function for men and women. And there's a lot of questions that people have had about Viagra, about sort of the history and the development of it that you were involved in. And now also you're working on a product and on a company rather called Vella, which is looking at the female sexual function side of things. But first I want to kind of roll it back a little bit, go back in time a little bit and just ask, as a urologist, how did you become a urologist? How did you start?
Well, urology is a surgical training. And I picked urology because there was a lot of interesting areas that one could operate in, the chest, the abdomen, the pelvis. But very soon after I started working in urology, sexual medicine, which was primarily penile implants at that time, were of interest to me, but I was interested in alternatives. And at the time I was training, penile injection therapy started. So in Paris with Ronald Virag, and that was an early interest of mine right from day one.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that urology involved more than just the sort of the pelvic region. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Urology is the surgical aspect of treating diseases of the kidneys, ureters, bladder, prostate, urethra, testicles, and usually not involving the female genital tract. But it is a specialty that encompasses the management of various diseases that are both genital and urinary.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, okay. So I'm coming in as a more sort of a lay person who
Sure.
works in this space, but more from a lay person's perspective. But in terms of these the penile injections, I didn't know that was a more okay. I guess walk me through in terms of going to Viagra, what were some of those different treatments in terms of
Sure.
the penile injections that existed before Viagra? And I ask this especially as someone who, I guess I'd be a millennial where I didn't know anything before Viagra. I have no
Sure.
knowledge or recollection of what those types of treatments were like.
Well, there's a long history before Viagra, but it was not what I would call a broadly successful history. There are good candidates for penile implants, but they are destructive procedures that destroy all of the smooth muscle within the erectile chambers when the cylinders are placed. And those cylinders can be either semi-rigid, meaning hard all the time, where they're bent into position, or inflatable. And the inflatable are cosmetically more appealing. But at the end of the day, these are surgical alternatives to producing not quite a natural erection. The discovery that the state of relaxation of the penile smooth muscle produces blood inflow and blood entrapment, which is an erection, led to the development of ways to relax that muscle. And the first of it was penile injections. It started, as I mentioned, in Paris, but Adrian Zerigniati in New York started the first U.S. program, and when I was at Boston University, we started the second penile injection program in the country. And when I came to the University of Southern California, we had a combination that we developed that was kind of unique of prostaglandin and phentolamine. They work very well, but they require an injection, and not everybody wants to inject that part of their anatomy. So the next step was I was the lead investigator for a pellet of the same drug, the prostaglandin, placed in the urethra. Not quite as effective, but less invasive. But none of these were really very attractive to a large population of men that suffer from erectile dysfunction. So these are treatments for arousal disorder, which in men is erection dysfunction. In women, it's the failure to lubricate and engorge. A cardiovascular medication that was in development for hypertension, possibly angina, in Sandwich, England, was discovered to have a side effect of enhancing erections in men that had erectile dysfunction. And that led to the development program for Viagra, sildenafil citrate, which eventually became Viagra, which is now part of the lexicon of our language.
Got it. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. But yeah, it's really interesting to think about, because I don't think, especially like now, like 30 plus years after Viagra came to market, people really remember or like appreciate like what were the alternatives before Viagra, that these were pretty intensive treatments. And like, also like how many people knew that these treatments existed, much less like did the treatments.
Right. I mean, there are barriers to going to see a doctor, but part of the process of the whole development program for Viagra was also a program to medicalize erectile dysfunction and to remove pejorative terms like impotence and use ED and look at demographics. You know, well over half the men over the age of 45 eventually suffer, and it's probably even larger as one gets older, suffer from erectile dysfunction. And a microscopic part of that population was addressed by the other prior therapies. And if you think about it, in medicine, it's pretty uncommon to find the holy grail of your specialty, right? A pill taken on demand that is exceedingly safe, and that it produces or enhances normal erectile function. So it was the holy grail. And it's probably, the other therapies still exist and are alternatives for men that don't have a contraindication to Viagra or don't respond to Viagra. But clearly Viagra's changed the landscape of sexual medicine and the amount of research that goes into it. And, those were the benefits. We did study Viagra in women, and in very large and well-controlled, placebo-controlled trials, and premenopausal, postmenopausal, and women on antidepressants. And there wasn't a signal that it was better than placebo. At Vella Bioscience, we have some evidence that it might be the fact that it was delivered orally, and in women, it may need a topical delivery of sildenafil to affect a positive response, but we haven't actually studied it specifically.
Got it. Yeah, I guess also, well, before I get deeper into stuff about like Viagra and Vella and like get more nerd out a little more about that, how did Viagra initially come about?
Well, Viagra came about as a cardiovascular medication that was found to have a side effect, if you will, of erectile enhancement. And then that was in England, in the United Kingdom. And then large pivotal studies were performed around the world for all the regulatory agencies. Clearly, the largest ones were in the U.S. We studied men with erectile dysfunction, men with diabetes and erectile dysfunction, spinal cord injury men, and also, radical prostatectomy, radical pelvic surgery related erectile dysfunction in men with Viagra. And this body of evidence was delivered to the FDA. It was approved, and the drug was approved in April, I think it was April 28th of 1998, and it was on the market in the following month.
Okay, got it. What was the time frame from like the inception of discovering Viagra to 1998?
Right. Well, it was discovered and then studied for a few years in cardiovascular medicine. But if you really look at the, it was sort of 1992 to 1994. In fact, there's a 3-part Discovery documentary that's coming out, Discovery Plus documentary on Viagra.
Oh, cool.
I happen to be the urologist that they selected to participate in it, but it'll have the history of it, all the key players from David Brinkley and Janice Lipsky at Pfizer to I think people that the testimonials, actual patient testimonials. So look out for it. I think it should be really good.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Give me the details and I'll plug it into.
I'll let you know when it's out.
I'll watch it too for sure.
Yeah, no. So the history of Viagra and the patent life, the patent expired in the 2000s at some point in time, the latter part of the 2000s. But the lead into it was a pretty quick program. The real U.S. study started around 1996 or so. It could have been a little bit earlier, and the approval was 98, and the rest is history, if you will. There have been, I oversaw the first human trials in erectile dysfunction with Cialis and participated in those trials in Levitra, but nothing's had the first and best in class effect of Viagra.
Got it. Yeah, and also let's see, there's sort of two things I want to ask from this, and it's partly one of them leads into a bit with the development with Vella is, I guess one is a friend of mine was asking about this, like, ask him about it if you have time. Was there any sort of, I'm just trying to think of how to, basically her question was like, was there any sort of interesting relationship that you saw with either like around that time or in the years since Viagra and other ED pills have come into the market of like erectile dysfunction and using antidepressants?
Well, antidepressants, particularly in women, have a high incidence of sexual dysfunction, diminished desire in particular, but also arousal and orgasm disorder at the end of the day. 45% of women that are on antidepressants have sexual dysfunction. 15% discontinue it. Most psychiatrists don't even tell their patients about this in anticipation. It usually occurs within a couple of weeks of starting it. Sometimes it's permanent. And it's very interesting. Though Viagra didn't work, we've had a lot of anecdotal reports, and we've actually studied it in antidepressant-related sexual dysfunction and have a patent application on it.
Got it. What was, I guess, like as a comparison, are there any sort of like research or stats for men and people with penises who have tried SSRIs and like had an impact on sexual function or relationship with Viagra?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there are studies, and again, men are affected by delayed ejaculation and diminished desire. Some have erectile dysfunction. That erectile dysfunction can be treated with Viagra, but men usually have more of a complaint about delayed ejaculation or diminished desire.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So
it does work in erectile dysfunction secondary to SSRIs.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like then the use of SSRIs seems to have a larger impact on women generally, or
it may be a larger impact on the arousal side just because there aren't any therapies for it. And including drug holidays, discontinuing it even. In some people, there's still a sexual dysfunction that persists. But we at Vella, we are planning a medical spin out, and we have identified new molecules that we think will be very effective in treating SSRI-induced arousal and orgasm disorders in women. Vella is not a treatment for Vella. Our primary flagship product is not a treatment for sexual dysfunctions, though. Right. It's a sexual wellness product that enhances sexual function, but we don't promote it for the treatment of sexual dysfunctions.
Right. So I guess, yeah, let's jump a little bit into Vella and what Vella is, since, well, and then also your involvement with Vella, because I especially find it interesting because of your involvement with Viagra, and it's like, okay, you do Viagra, now you're doing Vella.
Right.
What, I guess first, what is Vella?
Okay. Well, Vella is a liposomal cannabidiol. So the cannabidiol and cannabinoids, we studied them in preclinical studies, not Vella, not animal studies with Vella, but we studied cannabidiol or CBD and demonstrated that it relaxes vaginal smooth muscle, which is, just like in men, the sine qua non, the prerequisite for arousal. The relaxation of that muscle lets blood flow in, engorgement happen, and lubrication happen. So we knew from our preclinical studies that CBD did what Viagra didn't do when delivered orally. The problem is, and it's not a problem for us, but it's a problem for our competitors, is that if you put cannabidiol or any cannabinoid into a lotion or an oil like coconut oil, it will not be absorbed beyond the stratum corneum of the skin.
So
because it's so fatty, it sticks to just think of it as it sticks in the skin. The liposomal nanoencapsulation allows an active delivery deep beneath the skin so that it can be delivered to the smooth muscle to affect that relaxation.
Got it. Okay, yeah, so I'll translate a little bit into layperson's terms. Basically, the CBD that is in ingredients and other products doesn't really go through the skin.
Right.
Okay, yeah. Whereas the one that
the liposomal does.
Got it.
And you need to deliver to that smooth muscle because that's what you want to change and relax to facilitate arousal and orgasm. And we've studied it. To date, our flagship product, it's not our only product. We have a few that are launching, but let's focus on Vella. We studied it in 20 women that were 23 to 61 years of age, I believe, and a 75-year-old physician as well, which would have actually improved our numbers. She was a responder. So we've studied it, and our preclinical evidence is that the effect of CBD persists regardless of whether you're menopausal or premenopausal or not even near menopause. So it works regardless of age. We studied it in a group of these 20 women with a broad age range that were sexually competent, if you want to use a medical term, of being able to have orgasms. I didn't think that the ceiling was high enough that we'd see much of an effect, but lo and behold, they used it 4 times over a period of a month and had a questionnaire that resembles, is an abbreviated version of a validated questionnaire used in drug trials. And we looked at domains of desire, arousal, and orgasm. And what we saw in these women was a dramatic effect where there was a 30% increase in desire, but we think that's just a positive feedback from being successful in their sexual activity. There was a 63% of women improved in either maintenance or frequency of lubrication, so arousal. And 9 out of 10 women had some aspect of their orgasm improved. 40% had an increase in frequency of orgasm. 50% had an increase in ease of orgasm, and 60% had an increase in intensity of orgasm. Overall, about 2 out of 3 women will responded in the trials in a way that they would reuse it on a regular basis because of their satisfaction, if you will. And what we found in over 20,000 women that have used it, and that we've surveyed a number of these women at various points in time, that the 2/3 or 70% response and satisfaction rate persists in the real world.
Interesting. Yeah, it's particular. I guess it's interesting hearing this from you, because I didn't I've been familiar with Vella and your company and your company's development over the past few years, from like meeting some of you at like South by before Corona, and I've followed the company, for a few years now, and I didn't know that the sort of, how do I put it? Like the way that Vella is addressing female sexual function sounds like it's actually pretty similar to Viagra and male sexual function.
Well, there are a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's all smooth muscle, right, focused. But Viagra is a prescription pharmaceutical. We're not. We don't have the contraindications to nitrates and things that the Viagra has. In the tens of thousands of women that have used it, we have 3 reports of local sensitivity, meaning they are sensitive to anything that they apply there, not resulting in anything that was allergic, but just, saying that I felt more sensitive, which is a pretty low. And when you really look at it, this is a topical local delivery of a small dose of cannabidiol, and it's not going to be absorbed systemically. There's not going to be any other effects aside from what you really see in the genitals. And it's a topical application that's done. Some women respond very quickly within 5 minutes. We recommend that you use it 15 to 20 minutes prior to sexual intimacy, or wait. You're not going to get maximal effect till then, but you may be able to whittle that time down. It's not an internal application. It's a serum that's applied in the labia minora, the clitoris, and the vestibule, which is the outside of the vagina. The outside of the vulva, not the vagina. And it's pretty simple. It's fairly easy to use. There's no taste, no effects on the partner either. So it's perfectly safe to use in various intimate activities. And, we're in the wellness area. And in the wellness area, everything works for everybody 100% of the time. We don't believe in that. Our science shows that if you're a responder, you're going to be and it's a high percentage, 70%. You're going to be very satisfied. If you're not a responder of one of those 30%, we haven't looked at ways of salvaging those people yet with other combinations or other cannabinoids, but we've studied a large number of molecules, and we have plans for next generation and for a pharma pathway as well.
Got it. Yeah, that's something. So I forgot to ask it before, but I'll ask it now since it's kind of come up here. Like in terms of with Viagra, it's a pharmaceutical product, whereas this current Vella product is more, would you say, a supplement, or in the wellness space, or what would be the...
Well, it is a sexual wellness product. Mm-hmm. It's not, it's hemp derived, 99% pure CBD isolate. You could consider it a nutritional supplement. I'm not sure if that's the most accurate way to describe it, but it's a farm regulated product from a legal perspective, and found, as there's been a plethora of things that CBD's been found in, with a lot of sort of non-scientific conjecture about its effect or its value. But we've studied it scientifically, and clearly it enhances normal sexual function in women who are sexually functioning.
So in terms of Vella, at least the current product that Vella has on the market right now, how did you come to focusing on CBD as one of the key ingredients?
Right. Well, there was a lot of anecdotal stuff going on a few years ago about various cannabinoids, as you remember, when legalization was happening, when the Farm Act came into place and legalized CBD from hemp. And I had an idea, but ideas are easy, so I have to mention my colleagues who helped execute and bring it to market. So I had an idea that let's look at CBD. I had a conference with the prior commissioner of the FDA, David Kessler, some people that included NIH people that presented, and there was a CME event in cannabinoids in medicine soon after the National Academy of Sciences did a publication on the evidence that exists for health impacts of cannabinoids. And I invited some industry people there, and Vella came out of an incubator called Nanomolecular Science, and two people were there, Niall Demina and Michael Frid. They were at Mana. Michael is the chief product officer at Vella Bioscience, and Niall is the CEO. Niall green-lighted studies that I don't think anybody in the cannabis industry would have thought of, let alone green-light, and really facilitated Michael and I to co-invent what became Vella. I had an idea about liposomes because I'd worked on them in the summer of '78, but Michael has the that goes back personally quite far. But Vella really began when Michael, with the studies that Niall approved, and with Michael and I working collaboratively, but particularly with Michael's formulation expertise. I should also mention the other founders. So Michael, Niall, and myself, and Carolyn Wheeler, who was our COO, are the founders. And the development of Vella was built on both the preclinical studies that we understood, but also an understanding that if you're going to have a product for sexual activity that is appealing and safe for a broad range of women, it needs to be condom compatible. And if you're in an oil or a lotion and the cannabinoids are there, they're going to rupture a condom.
Yep.
So the liposomes facilitate the cannabinoids being carried in an aqueous, a water solution, as opposed to a fat solution like medium chain triglycerides or coconut oil. Now, that water solution should facilitate condom compatibility, but we did formal third-party testing for what you would do to get a personal lubricant approved by the FDA. And we demonstrated that polyisoprene and latex condoms are completely compatible with Vella, or vice versa.
Yeah, which is awesome because that pretty much doesn't happen for any of the like cannabinoid based lubricant or like cannabinoid based serums that are currently on the market. Right.
And it's for us, it's an important aspect of if you're going to have a product, it needs to be safe, not just to the person using it, but safe from a sexual perspective.
Yeah.
So we have four founders. Niall Demina, Michael Frid, Carolyn Wheeler, and myself, but we also have a very critical person who's our chief marketing officer, Bulbul Huda. Bulbul comes from a background that facilitate the beautiful branding and packaging. She comes from a prestige beauty background from Shiseido, Unilever, I believe L'Oreal as well. Her aesthetics, her understanding of the beauty industry, which none of the founders really had, has allowed us to, our website won a Webby this year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we beat out the Apple Watch website. And we won a number of awards. We're at Cosmoprof next week, actually, which is the largest North American beauty industry related convention. And there is something called Cosmotrend by a third-party independent entity that has identified innovative products that are perhaps going to be leaders in the ensuing years, and we've been identified as one of those on the short list, and fingers crossed we'll make it for the sexual wellness category.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and Bulbul has really brought a certain aesthetic and understanding in the industry and manages all of our agencies that have created the look, feel, aesthetic of Vella.
Yeah, because I remember I knew y'all when it was mainly Mana, or when it was branded as like Mana.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of a science, or like I appreciate the sciencey aspects of things. So like it did speak to me in a way, but yeah, it is definitely like as Vella and as the current branding and presentation now, it's definitely different and there's more of this like elegance to it that I think appeals more to a broader audience too.
Well, it was important to me, and I think it's important to everyone in the company, that we are identified as a sexual wellness product, that we're not in the cannabinoid category. We don't present at cannabis meetings. We don't want to be confused as something that makes your vagina high or some of the ridiculous stuff that you read out there. We want to be able to speak in a language that is understood by our primary audience, which is women. So women for our face forward in the company, Carolyn and Bobo really are the people that we want to have associated visually, intellectually, externally, because I think women speak better to this than any man ever could. You know, we develop the science, but the communication, the language, the lexicon is developed by Bobo and Carolyn. It's important to us it just happens to be a molecule that produces smooth muscle relaxation. It's coincidentally a cannabinoid, but if you look at the whole cannabis industry is rife with pseudoscience, you know, people using terms like full spectrum, which is an extract of you don't know what it is, you know, and you can't, there are some cannabinoids that have absolutely no effect. We haven't found any that have a deleterious effect, but we haven't really studied all of them, but we've studied the non-psychoactive, more uncommon cannabinoids, and we've identified 2 that are, and one for sure that could be a follow-on candidate to CBD. So for us, we want to speak the language that's understood not only by our primary audience, women, but also by scientists that we want to collaborate with. A lot of this is from my past 25 years in sexual medicine, but we have amazing consultants that are world-renowned in the area of psychiatry, sexual medicine, and gynecology. And we don't promote those. We don't advertise them because they're serious scientists. We want to use them for serious work. Some of them are on our pitch decks for fundraising, but that's not our primary purpose. Our primary purpose is how can we do something and how can we do it better than anybody else.
Got it. And yeah, we kind of passed it, but yeah, for people who are not as familiar with cannabinoids, like there's hundreds, dare I say, thousands, at least hundreds
over
of
100.
different. Okay, yeah, over 100 different types of cannabinoids. So it's a whole, that's like almost a whole different podcast episode in and of itself. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of different misunderstandings of just cannabinoids.
From my background in science, from my background, I don't understand how you can take a hodgepodge of stuff that you can't tell me what's in there, except it's a full spectrum extract from the cannabis plant, and tell me what each one of those molecules is doing. And that would drive me crazy. I think you need to isolate a molecule and say this is the one that works to enhance sexual function, isolate another molecule and say, hey, this one might be valuable in treating sexual dysfunctions and so on. But we've stayed clear of the whole cannabis area. We don't think it's going anywhere. We do think sexual wellness, and the history's validated this, that during the pandemic, the cosmetic industry had a huge drop in revenues from cosmetics. Hair products, not so much the drop. But sexual wellness became huge.
Yeah.
It saved a lot of companies. And we believe beauty's become a subset of wellness. Of wellness, there's also sexual wellness is a component of this, and from a holistic perspective. And that's where our focus is. That's where our audience is. Our e-com site has been tremendously successful. It's vellabio.com. But we're in Neiman, Nordstrom, Saks, Bergdorf.
Blue Mercury.
Well, Blue Mercury's a very, Cosbar, which was the first non-department store standalone cosmetics store, was founded by Lily Garfield, who is not only our a member of our board of directors and investor, but she's also going to come on and play an active role in the company. Historically, a very important person in the industry. Again, where was I?
Oh, you were talking about that Vella. Well, where Vella is sold, where Vella is in these big mainstream department stores. Yeah.
So you asked me about Blue Mercury.
Yeah.
Blue Mercury, of the stores I mentioned, most of our presence actually is online. And that's that's difficult. You need to interact with people to answer their questions. It needs some marketing behind it. Blue Mercury and Cosbar, but more recently, Blue Mercury has us in 45 stores, soon to expand to all of their stores. We've been involved in educating their salespeople because there are nuances. This isn't a promise like a skin cream. This is a real functional benefit, but there's some nuances to the use. You need to try it a few times, etc. And Blue Mercury has been a tremendous partner from the retail side. But we think that all of this is going to just grow exponentially in the next few years. We're about to be launched in Boots in the UK,
awesome.
Which is their largest prestige beauty retailer, and soon after the EU.
Got it. Yeah, and that's, I mean, especially with like Blue Mercury and Cosbar.
Yes.
Especially with those two at least currently being in stores, that's big news for sexual wellness, because you see all these headlines of different sexual wellness companies having a presence in retail, but oftentimes it's only online retail, which it's pros. I mean, it's it's still good, but it's not.
It's okay. Yeah. It's just okay. But being in the stores, I mean, we have an online presence, right? And from a perspective of sales, we'd rather sell on our store but we want to support our retail partners. And Cosbar was one of the first, and Lily has been a tremendous supporter. Blue Mercury had posters on their windows.
Oh, wow.
And on those 45 stores.
That's big.
We're talking Tribeca to, very sort of visible, high-profile locations. And that was great. No one else has ever done that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and if you have pictures too, I can also show some of the pictures on the video for people. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, if there's any interesting pictures, we can talk about it after. But yeah, no, that's pretty huge, especially.
Yeah, that just happened in the last few weeks. It is.
Oh wow, okay, yeah.
And it's interesting. You get a lot of feedback. I was the one involved in educating most of the store personnel, and almost all of them had tried it. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of good positive. And if you've tried it and you sort of, are motivated, then, I mean, you're not going to ask every 60-year-old that walks in for eyeliner whether they're happy with their orgasms. But if you make it visible, it will inspire the question when you remember the data that over half of these women aren't happy with their orgasms and would be happy to either ask you a question or try it in the privacy of their home.
Right. Yeah, no, that's huge in terms of like advocacy in retail, because or thinking are you in Sephora right now, or? We aren't
in Sephora.
Got it.
But Sephora and Ulta are targets for us.
Got it. Yeah, like I'm more of I shop at like the Sephora and Ulta. So this is sort of the mindset I'm in, but like when I'm saying this, but yeah, like if you go to any of these beauty stores, like a Sephora or an Ulta or wherever, you have all these different brands that you're competing with because it's super crowded. Like there's so many brands. So yeah, having something that's different that people are excited about is huge.
Right. Well, Boots is like Sephora isn't in the UK, but Boots is like a Sephora in the UK.
That's true. Yeah.
And Europe is more advanced in some perspectives in this, and we think the retailers in Europe in the UK will show American retailers how to do this and the value of it. But we're pretty stoked about Blue Mercury.
Yeah. Okay, so if you don't mind me steering to another question that I've often heard from different people, I wanted to quickly just kind of touch on like the effects of a sort of like CBD serum for men and people with penises, because we've written a little bit about at Lioness a bit about like different types of products out there, and one of the most common questions we get is usually a guy writing in who's like, can I use this? Well, I get a similar effect. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you had something that you wanted to kind of say to that.
Sure, I can address it. The liposomal serum is not going to penetrate the tunica albuginea, which is the tough fascial lining of the penile chambers that facilitate rigidity. So it's not going to have the same effect. Now, if you injected it into the penis, would it? I don't know. It could well have some effect there. you can apply it topically and absorb it into the glans penis, which is part of the corpus spongiosum, which is not an erectile cylinder, but it engorges, right? But no, this is not going to have any effect in men.
Got it. Okay. I'll have to let some disappointed people know. I guess another one too, just since sometimes, and you can tell me if I'm wrong with this, this is sometimes what we've mentioned to people who've asked this is, could there be some similar effect if they apply, or like say if they have a suppository and they apply it via the rectum?
So we've had people use it, and it relaxes the anal sphincter, smooth muscle, but it doesn't have any sexual effects.
Okay. So more.
And if you put it into a little pellet like Muse and put it in the urethra, maybe a little bit. But at the end of the day, the only way you're going to get erection enhancement is probably by an injection in the penis.
Got it. Okay.
Which isn't really progress.
Yeah. Okay. So sorry, guys.
Listen, guys have enough options. The heck with it. Yeah. We need to, it's the era of equality and finding just, I was involved in developing a half a dozen or more, successfully developing, but examining probably a couple dozen molecules for men. And we examined Cialis in women, Viagra in women. There's plenty of options for men. And if they don't like any of them, they can have an implant with a urologist. But I think the future of both sexual wellness and its sister partner of sexual medicine, female sexual medicine, is the future is going to be in that arena as far as broadening the impact of sexual medicines and sexual wellness products because women are underserved.
Got it. Yeah, I think it partly, or at least the questions may partly come from sort of maybe from a similar place with women asking if Viagra works for them, where it's like, oh, I heard that this thing works for this group of people.
Right.
Can it work for me? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, and you can always say on an individual, and they may have said, hey, I think it did something, but in large-scale clinical trials, and one of our first consultants in marketing who referred Bulbul to us was Janice Lipsky, and I'd worked with Janice. She was the team lead for Viagra. She helped launch it with David Brinkley, and she oversaw the female studies, and she was the one that decided that there was inadequate evidence to support its use support its submission to the FDA. And I think that we've had, there just really isn't any evidence in large-scale clinical trials that Viagra does anything for women. Doesn't mean sildenafil, the active pharmaceutical in Viagra, might have an effect. Doesn't mean that couldn't have an effect if delivered another way where you can get larger concentrations in the vaginal smooth muscle. So that's one of our next things that we're doing.
Fingers crossed it goes well.
Thank you.
I don't know how, or are you sort of public with, or like in terms of like if I publish it on a podcast, or do you
you can mention that. Yeah, no, but this would be we're going to spin out a separate company to do that.
What's next for Vella and what's next for you?
So what's next for Vella is, so we're dedicated to the application of science for women, and we are looking at other ways to improve Vella and next generation products and combinations. But the more immediately, we have a couple of lubricants that are coming out that aren't hero products like Vella. They're not revolutionary, but they're unique. One is a lubricant for postmenopausal women. I think there's a lot of interest in addressing a lot of the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause. This is our first foray in there. It uses hyaluronic acid, which is also a moisturizing, hydrating molecule that isn't found in in lubricants currently. And the other is squalene, which we are adding to a lubricant that is for both men and women, silicone-based lubricant. But the next hero product we're looking at is, although sexual dysfunction and more so sexual dissatisfaction is common, nothing's more common in women maybe than pain with menses. I'm not talking about pain that is related to endometriosis or adenomyosis or a medical condition, but just pain with menstruation. When the uterus contracts, it cuts off blood flow that allows the lining of the uterus to slough off and shed, but that causes the release of compounds like prostaglandins that cause pain. We have done a similar kind of series of preclinical studies, and we believe we have a way to diminish pain that can be debilitating in primary dysmenorrhea, which is painful menses from the time you first start having menses, not associated with a medical condition, and that affects up to 90% of women after menarche.
Let me know when that comes out.
We're
not asking for a friend.
We're looking at the first quarter of 2023.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's already in development.
Awesome. Okay. I will keep following.
So science in the service of women. That's what Vella is all about.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that it's becoming this like broad spectrum of different types of products that are serving different needs.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have our sexual enhancement arena that we look at in the pain arena. We have I forgot to mention a patch for perimenstrual pain, a CBD patch. But the CBD patch and the two lubricants augment and give us more, if you will, products in our portfolio. The hero product currently is Vella, and the next hero product will be it doesn't have a name yet, but our product for menstrual pain.
Got it. And then where can people find Vella, and where can people find you?
So you can find everything you want to know about Vella in vellabio.com, VELLABIO.com. And there's ways to contact any of the founders and our marketing officer there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hosting me here. Thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it, and I learned a lot in this hour and a half or so.
Thanks for all the work that you're doing with your company. It's
thank you.
Certainly complimentary.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to doing more experiments with Vella. Let's just say.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like, a star rating, and also subscribe if you want to hear more episodes like this. Until next time, stay curious.